We're going to start a new book today called The City of Ember. This is one of my favorites to read in the classroom, so I'm sad that I won't be there to predict with you and talk about the book with you, but this is a great book. I'll show you, and I'll put it better. There's a map of the city, and so I'll make sure to put that in the video so you can see that as we go. Okay, let's start. The first part is called The Instructions. When the city of Ember was just built and not yet inhabited, the chief builder and the assistant builder, both of them weary, sat down to speak of the future. They must not leave the city for at least 200 years, said the chief builder, or perhaps 220. Is that long enough? Asked his assistant. It should be, but we can't know for sure. And when the time comes, said the assistant, how will they know what to do? We'll provide them with instructions, of course, the chief builder replied. But who will keep the instructions? Who can we trust to keep them safe and secret all that time? The mayor of the city will keep the instructions, said the chief builder. We'll put them in a box with a time clock set to open on the proper date. And we will tell the mayor what's in the box, said the assistant. No, just that it's just information they won't need and must not see until the box opens of its own accord. So the first mayor will pass the box to the next mayor, and that one to the next, and so on through the years, all of them keeping a secret all that time? What else can we do? Said the chief builder. Nothing about this endeavor is certain. There may be no one left in the city by then, or no safe place for them to come back to. So the first mayor of Ember was given the box, told to guard it carefully, and solemnly swore to secrecy. When she grew old and her time as mayor was up, she explained about the box to her successor, who also kept the secret carefully, as did the next mayor. Things went as planned for many years, but the seventh mayor of Ember was less honorable than the ones who had come before him, and more desperate. He was ill. He had the coughing sickness that was common in the city then, and he thought the box might hold a secret that would save his life. He took it from its hiding place in the basement of the gathering hall and brought it home with him, where he attacked it with a hammer. But his strength was failing then, and all he managed to do was to dent the little. But before he could return the box to its official hiding place or tell his successor about it, he died. And the box ended up at the back of a closet, shoved behind some old bags and bundles. And there it sat, unnoticed, year after year, until its time arrived, and the lock quietly clicked open. Chapter 1, Assignment Day. In the city of Ember, the sky was always dark. The only light came from the great flood lamps mounted on the buildings at the top of poles in the middle of larger squares. When the lights were on, they cast a yellowish glow over the streets. People walking by threw long shadows that shortened and they stretched out again. When the lights were off, as they were between 9 at night and 6 in the morning, the city was so dark that people might as well have been wearing blindfolds. Sometimes darkness fell in the middle of the day. The city of Ember was old, and everything in it, including the power lines, were in need of repair. So now and then the lights would flicker and go out. These were terrible moments for the people of Ember, as they came to a halt in the middle of the street or stood stock still in their houses, afraid to move in the utter blackness. They were reminded of something that they preferred not to think about, that someday the lights of the city might go out and never come back on. But most of the time, life proceeded as it always had. Grown people did their work, and younger people, until they reached the age of 12, went to school. On the last day of their final year, which was called Assignment Day, they were given jobs to do. The graduating students occupied room 8 of Ember School. On Assignment Day in the year 241, this classroom, usually noisy at first thing in the morning, was completely silent. All 24 students sat upright and still in their desks, as they had grown too big for. They were waiting. The desks were arranged in 4 rows of 6. One behind the other. In the last row sat a slender girl named Lina Mayfleet. She was winding a strand of her long dark hair around her finger, winding and unwinding it again. Sometimes she plucked at the thread on her ragged cape or bent over to pull on her socks, which were loose and tended to slide down around her ankles. One of her feet tapped the floor softly. In the second row was a boy named Dune Harrow. He sat with his shoulders hunched and his eyes squeezed shut in concentration and his hands clasped tightly together. His hair looked rumpled as if he hadn't combed it for a while. He had dark, thick eyebrows which made him look serious at the best of times, and when he was anxious or angry, came together to form a straight line across his forehead. His brown corduroy jacket was so old that its ridges had flattened out. Both the girl and the boy were making urgent wishes. Dune's wish was very specific. He repeated it over and over again, his lips moving slightly as if he could make it come true by saying it 1,000 times. Lina was making her wish in pictures rather than words. In her mind's eye, she saw herself running through the streets of the city in a red jacket. She made this picture as bright and as real as she could. Lina looked up and gazed around the schoolroom. She said a silent goodbye to everything that had been familiar for so long. Goodbye to the map of the city of Ember in its scarred wooden frame, the cabinet whose shelves held the Book of Numbers, the Book of Letters, and the Book of the City of Ember. Goodbye to the cabinet drawers labeled new paper and old paper. Goodbye to the 3 electric lights on the ceiling that seemed always, no matter where you sat, to cast shadows over your head, over the page where you were writing on. And goodbye to their teacher, Miss Thorne, who had finished her last day of school speech, wishing them luck in their lives what they were about to begin. Now, running out of things to say, she was standing at her desk with her frayed shawl clasped around her shoulders. And still the mayor, the guest of honor, had not arrived. Someone's foot scraped back and forth on the floor. Miss Thorne sighed, and then the door rattled open, and the mayor walked in. He looked annoyed, as though they were the ones who were late. "Oh, welcome, Mayor Cole," said Miss Thorne. She held out a hand to him. The mayor made his mouth into a smile. "Miss Thorne," he said, enfolding her hand. "Greetings, another year." The mayor was a vast, heavy man, so big in the middle that his arms looked small and dangling. In one hand he held a little cloth bag. He lumbered to the front of the room and faced the students. His gray, drooping face appeared to be made of something stiffer than ordinary skin. It rarely moved except for making a smile that was on it now. "Young people of the highest class," the mayor began. He stopped and scanned the room for several moments. His eyes seemed to look out from far back inside of his head. He nodded slowly. "Assignment day, isn't it?" "Yes. First we get our education, then we serve our city." Again, his eyes moved back and forth along the rows of students, and again he nodded, as if someone had confirmed what he had said. He put the little bag on Miss Thorne's desk and rested his hands on it. "What will that service be, eh? Perhaps you're wondering." He did his smile again, and his heavy cheeks folded like drapes. Lina's hands were cold. She wrapped her cape around her and pressed her hands between her knees. "Please hurry, Mr. Mayor," she said silently. "Please just let us choose and get it over with." Dune in his mind was saying the same thing, only he didn't say please. "Something to remember," the mayor said, holding up one finger. "Job you draw today is for 3 years. Then evaluation. Are you good at your job? Fine, you may keep it. Are you unsatisfactory? Is there a greater need elsewhere? You will be reassigned. It is extremely important," he said, jabbing his finger at the class, "for all work of Ember to be done, to be properly done." He picked up the bag and pulled open the drawstring. "So, let us begin. Simple procedure, come up one at a time, reach in the bag, take one slip of paper and read it out loud." He smiled and nodded. The flesh under his chin bulged in and out. "Who cares to be first?" No one moved. Lina stared down at the top of her desk. There was a long silence. Then Lizzie Biscoe, one of Lina's best friends, sprang to her feet. "I would like to be first," she said with her breathless high voice. "Good! Walk forward." Lizzie went to stand before the mayor. Because of her orange hair, she looked like a bright spark next to him. "Now choose." The mayor held out the bag with one hand and put the other behind his back, as if to show he would not interfere. Lizzie reached into the bag and withdrew a tightly folded square of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Lina couldn't see the look on Lizzie's face, but she could hear the disappointment in her voice as she read it out loud. Supply depot clerk. Very good, said the mayor. A vital job. Lizzie trudged back to her desk. Lina smiled at her, but Lizzie made a sour face. Supply depot clerk wasn't a bad job, but it was a dull one. The supply depot clerks sat behind a long counter, took orders from storekeepers of Ember, and sent carriers down to bring up what was wanted from the vast network of storerooms beneath Ember streets. The storerooms held supplies of every kind: canned food, clothes, furniture, blankets, light bulbs, medicine, pots and pans, reams of paper, soap, more light bulbs, everything the people of Ember could possibly need. The clerks sat at their ledger books all day, recording the orders that came in and the goods that went out. Lizzie didn't like to sit still. She would have been better suited for something else. Lina thought, messenger maybe? The job that Lina wanted for herself. Messengers ran through the city all day, going everywhere, seeing everything. Next, said the mayor. This time, two people stood up at once, Orly Gordon and Chet Nam. Orly sat down again, and Chet approached the mayor. Choose, young man, the mayor said. Chet chose. He unfolded his scrap of paper. Electrician's helper, he read, and his wide face broke into a smile. Lina heard someone take a quick breath. She looked over to see Dune pressing his hand against his mouth. You never knew each year exactly which jobs would be offered. Some years there were several good jobs, like the greenhouse helper, or timekeeper's assistant, or messenger, and no bad jobs at all. Other years, jobs like pipeworks laborer, trash sifter, and mold scraper were mixed in. But there would always be at least one or two jobs for electrician's helper. Fixing electricity was the most important job in Ember, and the more people worked on it than anything else. Orly Gordon was next. She got the job of building repair assistant, which was a good job for Orly. She was a strong girl and liked to work hard. Vindy Chance was a greenhouse helper. She gave Lina a big grin as she went back to her seat. She'll get to work with Clary, Lina thought. Lucky. So far, no one had picked really bad jobs. Perhaps this time there would be no bad jobs at all. The idea gave her courage. Besides, she had reached the point where the suspense was giving her a stomachache. So as Vindy sat down, even before the mayor could say, next, she stood up and stepped forward. The little bag made of faded green material gathered at the top with a black string. Lina hesitated for a moment and then put her hand inside and fingered the bits of paper. Feeling as if she were stepping off a high building, she picked one. She unfolded it. The words were written black ink in small, careful printing. Pipeworks laborer, they said. She stared at them. Out loud, please, the mayor said. Pipeworks laborer, Lina said in a choked whisper. Louder, said the mayor. Pipeworks laborer, Lina said again, her voice loud and cracked. There was a sigh of sympathy from the class. Keeping her eyes on the floor, Lina went back to her desk and sat down. Pipeworks laborer worked below the storerooms in the deep labyrinth of tunnels that contained Ember's water and sewer pipes. They spent their days stopping up leaks and replacing pipe joints. It was wet, cold work. It could even be dangerous. A swift underground river ran through the pipeworks, and every now and then someone fell in it and was lost. People were lost occasionally in the tunnels, too, if they strayed too far. Lina stared miserably down at the letter B someone had scratched into the desk a long time ago. Almost anything would have been better than pipeworks laborer. Greenhouse helper would have been her second choice. She imagined with longing the warm air and earthy smell of the greenhouse where she could have worked with Clary, the greenhouse manager, someone she had known all her life. She would have been content with doctor's assistant too, binding up cuts and bones. Even street sweeper or cart puller would have been better. At least then she would have stayed above ground with space and people around her. She thought going down to the pipeworks must be like being buried alive. One by one, the other students chose their jobs. None of them got such a wretched job as her. Finally, the last person rose from his chair and walked forward. It was Dune. His dark eyebrows were drawn together in a frown of concentration. His hands, Lina saw, were clenched into fists at his side. Dune reached into the bag and took out the last scrap of paper. He paused a minute, pressing it tightly into his hand. Go on, read. Unfolding the paper, Dune read, "Messenger," and then scowled and crumpled the paper and dashed it to the floor. Lina gasped. The whole class rustled in surprise. Why would anyone be angry to get the job of messenger? "Bad behavior!" cried the mayor. His eyes bulged and his face darkened. "Go to your seat immediately!" Dune kicked the crumpled paper into the corner, and then he stalked back to his desk and flung himself down. The mayor took a short breath and blinked furiously. "Disgraceful," he said, glaring at Dune. "A childish display of temper. Students should be glad to work for their city. Ember will prosper if all citizens do their best." He held a stern finger as he said this and moved his eyes slowly from one face to the next. Suddenly Dune spoke up. "But Ember is not prospering," he said. "Everything is getting worse and worse." "Silence!" cried the mayor. "The blackouts!" cried Dune. He jumped up from his seat. "The lights go out all the time now. All the shortages. There's shortages of everything. If no one does anything about it, something terrible is going to happen." Lina listened with a pounding heart. What was wrong with Dune? Why was he so upset? He had taken things too seriously, as he always did. Miss Thorne strode to Dune and put a hand on his shoulder. "Sit down now," she said quietly, but Dune remained standing. The mayor glared. For a few moments he said nothing, and then he smiled, showing a neat row of gray teeth. "Miss Thorne," he said, "who might this young man be?" "I'm Dune Harrow," said Dune. "I will remember you," said the mayor. He gave Dune a long look and then turned to the class and smiled his smile again. "Congratulations to all," he said. "Welcome to the Ember's workforce. Miss Thorne, class, thank you." The mayor shook hands with Miss Thorne and departed. The students gathered their coats and caps and filed out of the classroom. Lina walked down the wide hallway with Lizzie, who said, "Oh, poor you. I thought I'd picked a bad one, but you got the worst. I feel lucky compared to you." Once they were out the door, Lizzie said goodbye and scurried away, as if Lina's bad luck were a disease she might catch.